I work part-time creating educational LARPs. And during this year's summer school, I had a talk about debriefing. And right now, I will sort of give a talk on an extended topic, the Paralarp. And before I start doing this, you need to know what the Paralarp is. And para is a Greek word that means anything that is above and beyond and surrounds something else. So in terms of LARPing, the Paralarp is everything that comes in addition to the runtime of your LARP. And this is really exciting as a LARP designer, because here we have a lot of possibilities to design and sort of form the experiences of our players. So in a way, the Paralarp is anything that happens from the moment that you announce that you will organize a LARP, or from the moment that you say that you have this vague idea about the LARP that you want to make. Just like after the pitches yesterday, now we know that you will create 11 LARPs, and we might have some sort of thoughts and ideas about your LARPs. We are talking about your LARPs, we are curious about them, maybe we give you some hints and tips and tricks about your LARPs. And, can it just be there? Yes? And in this way, we all have expectations about your LARPs. So even before your LARP has started, some stuff is going on. And on Sunday, tomorrow, we will be playtesting 11 LARPs, and that's super exciting. But that doesn't mean that the LARPs will cease to exist the moment we go to have dinner. Your LARPs will live on, and in a way, the full duration of your LARP is forever, so that it lives on when people talk about it, when they discuss their experiences. Maybe they get inspired by your LARP and want to create their own. And this is also a part of the Paralarp. So the point is that the player experience, it includes so much more than the actual runtime of your LARP. And we as designers, we are shaping this experience together with our players. So for this talk, I will focus on the pre-brief workshop and the debrief, because these are 2 points of your LARP design where you, to a higher degree, sort of can direct and design exactly what's going to happen. Because you can design a LARP, and then your players show up, and they enter the LARP, and then you have very little control over what happens. And this is a different way, sort of, in communicating with your players than when you run them through the pre-brief workshop and the debrief. And of course, like Eirik said yesterday, not all LARPs have a pre-brief workshop or a debrief. But I will use them as an example and as a means to communicate to you that as designers, you have the possibility and the responsibility to be conscious about the design choices that you make, how you communicate these design choices to your players, and then also help your players to participate in your LARP. So, let's say that I announce that I will organize this LARP. And around here, the dots are a bunch of players, and they're all like, is this a LARP that I would like to participate in? Is it a LARP that I want to sign up to or not? And for them to be able to make this decision, I need to give them some information. And there are several ways that I can give them this. And I will have to decide on what kind of information do I want to give them, and how will I give it to them. So, in a way, this is about managing your players' expectations. And how much information do I need to give my players for them to be able to make an informed decision about whether they want to participate or not? What can they expect of you as a designer and as an organizer? And what do you expect of them as players? And I think this is important because maybe we usually forget that this is actually a designable surface. Like, we go directly to designing the workshop, and then we leave this part of managing the players' expectations and whether they want to sign up or not to the organizer. And the organizer isn't always the same person as the designer. So you can actually include bits and pieces in your LARP script, for instance, on how you want the organizers to tell the potential players about the LARP and make them sign up. So it doesn't have to be a thing that you leave to the organizers. And then there are different ways that you can give your players this information. And for instance, we can use the mixing desk as a common frame of reference. So in addition to telling my players like the theme of the LARP and whether it's a big or a small LARP or where it will be, I can tell them like who will have the responsibility of creating the characters and the culture. Is this a player responsibility or an organizer and designer responsibility? And if the players are supposed to do it, how will I help them to do that? Is it a verbal LARP? Or is it a physical LARP? And in terms of openness, maybe you have a lot of secrecy in your LARP. And you can tell your players that there is a lot of secrecy in your LARP without telling them what the secrecy is about. You can even say like, my LARP is about 70% transparent. And this is of course an arbitrary number, but it will tell your players that they will know most of the things that will happen in your LARP, and then some things will be left unanswered or secrets. And often the players, they will of course ask for the information they need in order to know whether to sign up or not. But I think this is a really key element to managing their expectations, because if they know that it's a physical LARP, they will probably not show up and expect a lot of talking going on in the LARP. And if dancing is a huge part of your LARP, you should tell your players, so that players who are super uncomfortable with dancing will decide not to sign up. And then at some point you should also, of course, teach the players who are there how to dance the correct way. So I'm going to use an example. It's a LARP called Wilt that I designed together with Mats here. So in terms of managing player expectations, we could tell the players that it's a non-verbal LARP. It lasts about 4 hours. There will be a lot of physical touch and intimacy between the players. And the theme of the LARP is about the process of going through stages after a breakup. So I give them this information. And then 5 players, for some reason, they decide not to play the LARP. And that's okay. Then 8 players go like, yes, this sounds really interesting. I want this non-verbal, physical, intimate LARP about post-breakups. And they sign up. But then on the day of the LARP, only 6 players show up and 2 players don't, for some reason. And this is the reason, or a way to accommodate for this possibility that players sign up and don't arrive, is to put a lot of the preparations and working out how to play the LARP in the workshop, because then your design is a lot more flexible and scalable and less vulnerable than it would have been if 2 players decided not to show up. And these 6 players, they are sort of excited to play, but they are also having all these questions, like, what is this LARP really going to be like, and where are we going to pretend that we are? Who are we going to play, and who are all these other players and characters, and how will I play this LARP? How will I do this the right way? And this is where we enter the pre-brief and the workshop. And this is largely about the player transitioning from being a player in the real life and to becoming a character inside the fiction of your LARP. And you as a designer need to help your players making this transition. And the pre-brief and the workshop, they are really powerful tools that you can use for informing your players about the LARP and what they are going to do and how they are going to do them. And by doing this, you are hopefully increasing your players' trust in you as a designer and in the rest of the player group as fellow players. And this makes them more comfortable and ready to play whatever they are going to take part in. And there are 2 things that you need to think of. One of the things is what elements can and do you want to design in the workshop? And the other thing is, how do you want to design them and do them in the workshop? So for the first element, or the first aspect of it, like what can you and what do you want to design? Like an example could be if you have two players that are supposed to have this huge conflict and a big fight during the LARP. Maybe you want to workshop and calibrate their relationship and how this conflict is for them during the workshop, but not really play through the whole fighting scene during the workshop. This might be something you want to keep for the LARP itself. Or if I'm going to play the sword master in a LARP, and everyone knows that I'm this excellent sword throwing whatever person, then I should probably learn how to speak about it in a not silly way, and I should learn how to do it so I can be very convincing. And this is something I could practice during the workshop. But if the whole point of the LARP is that it will be my journey learning to become this sword master, then we might leave most of these elements to the actual LARP itself. So in the workshop, you can give the players information that they need to have in order to be able to play the LARP. And you can practice specific exercises or elements that it's important that they know as players, like this ritual that the characters have been doing a lot of times, but that the players actually need to learn. Or you can practice and teach your players how you want them to transition from one scene of the LARP to the other, for instance. And then it's also about calibrating the players' understanding of what will happen and how, because even if you use the mixing desk, for instance, when telling them about your LARP, not everyone knows what the mixing desk is. And if they do, we might all have different sort of understandings about it. So what I think of when I think of a physical LARP might not be the same of what everyone else thinks of. And this is why still in the workshop some players will show up and they will realize that, hey, this LARP isn't what I thought it was going to be like. So the workshop is sort of your last chance as a designer to actually get all your players on the same page. And then you have to decide on what elements that are critical for you to be able to have a scalable and a flexible design. Let's say that for my LARP I had 8 players originally signing up, and then 2 didn't show up. And if this was a LARP about a close family relationship, and we had been sort of planning the characters and the relations, and we had long pre-written characters that we had handed out well before the LARP started, it would be a lot more vulnerable when these 2 people didn't show up. But if we workshop all the characters and their relations in the workshop, the LARP design is a lot more flexible and also scalable in that way. So you don't risk being a brother and then not having your sister or your parents showing up, for instance. So that was like, what elements can you and do you want to design in your workshop? And then it's the way of how do you want to design these elements? How do you want to run the workshop, and what exercises do you want to include? And I think this is super exciting. You can like twist your brains and do a lot of really cool stuff about this. Like if you have a physical LARP, for instance, maybe you want to only have non-verbal workshop exercises. Or maybe you want to have a workshop where you slowly stop talking and you come into this soft, gentle mood that you want in the LARP. And then it's important for you to know that the players will look to you as the experts. You are the people that are supposed to answer all the questions they need answered before they feel ready to play your LARP. So if you look like you know what you're doing, and you look like you have all the answers to all the possible questions, hopefully the players will lean back and relax and trust you, and they will follow you on this workshop journey into the LARP. So continuing on the example of Wilt, we wanted to to show our gratitude. So we told the players that we were very happy they wanted to play. We did a round of names and expectations to see how they were feeling and what they were expecting of the LARP. Repeated some key information and did a warm-up. And in our LARP we had 7 stages that were all separated by guided meditations. So it was naturally very important that the players knew what the guided meditations would be like, so they wouldn't be up in their heads and stressing all the time about what was going to happen next. So we practiced the guided meditation. And then during the LARP we had several physical restrictions, like we told the players to behave and act in certain ways. Like in one point, they were supposed to stand with their backs against each other, holding hands. And we wanted this to feel like uncomfortable and a bit strange. So during the workshop, we had an exercise where we asked them to stand facing each other and holding hands, because this is the comfortable way of interacting. And that way they would have that sort of in the back of their heads, this experience of doing it the comfortable way that would create an extra layer when they did it the uncomfortable way. And then it was the whole structure of the workshop, because since the LARP was about breaking up, we created a workshop that would mimic the feeling of falling in love with someone. So 2 players met, they started to get to know each other, the characters, and we slowly built their intimacy and the stories they had together and the relationship as a couple. And we did this hopefully having a calm voice and having slow movements, doing a lot of the exercises sitting on the floor, because it creates a completely different energy than if you're standing and waving your hands and talking really fast. Now the players are inside the LARP, they play, yes, and they exit the LARP and enter the debriefing. And now the players need to go through a transition from being a character in the fiction to a player in the real life. And just like the workshop, you as a designer can help your players to make this transition. And so debriefing is some sort of structured after talk and exercises that the players can do after they have played your LARP. And it can serve many different purposes and functions, just like we are all different players and we prepare for a LARP in different ways. We also have different ways we prefer sort of landing or getting back to real life from a LARP. And we can have needs that are on an individual level, on a relational level, and on a more collective or community level. So in the debrief, you can help your players to reframe the fiction. This means recontextualize the experiences they have had during the LARP, leaving the character behind, and sort of telling their brain that they did what they did because they were playing, they were LARPing. And leaving behind the character's personality and social relations and history and their experiences can be, for some people, a very easy thing to do. Sometimes it can be difficult. Sometimes they really want to just get out of there and leave everything behind. And sometimes this is a grieving process. Like there are some things that it's really hard to leave behind and that you might not want to leave behind. And then in the emotional support, it's about providing a space and a time for your players to reflect and to share and talk about their experiences and their emotions. And this is also about normalizing the experience, because a lot of players, they can get quite insecure about how they are feeling. Like, am I the only one feeling like this right now? And maybe they feel ashamed about the things that they feel, but when they start sharing, they will experience that other players have the same or the different reactions to what they have been doing. And then the collective narrative is about sharing and communicating sort of the fiction among the players, because usually no players experience a LARP in a similar manner. And this is the beauty of LARP as an art form. But also sharing, like my individual story with the rest of the players, can be a really powerful tool in creating a sense of unity and of having shared the experience anyway. But some players, they want to keep their own experience. They don't want to pull it apart and analyze it and tell all the other players about it. And this is of course okay, like there should be some gaps and some holes that you don't need to fill and that you can leave for your players to sort of figure out themselves. And LARPing is a collaborative and it's a collective art form. We are all a part of a community. So sharing an intense experience that you have had in a LARP can create really tight bonds and a feeling of closeness between people that didn't even know each other at all before they started LARPing. And this helps creating an atmosphere on like a broader level, maybe, that could reinforce the community and the positive feelings, maybe, that we have about this community. So these are different elements that you can design for in your debriefing. And then it's of course the element of how do you run the debrief and what exercises do you include in it. And then sometimes we as designers, we have special needs that we need to take care of in the debriefing. For instance, if you have just made and run an educational LARP, you have this specific pedagogic need that you need to like steer your players towards. And in this case, it might be a lot more useful to actually fill the holes of the participants, to make sure that they are all sort of united and that what they have experienced in the LARP goes in the direction of the actual learning goals and the outcome of the educational LARP. Or it can be that sometimes organizers could have a wish that they want the players to go out of the LARP and feel like rock stars, like this was a really, really, really great experience. And then you can actually design the debrief to steer or maybe manipulate, like shape the player's story about the LARPs that they just participated in. So again, back to Wilt. We got some feedback after the first runs that players felt a little bit strange starting talking immediately after the LARP was over. So we included a workshop or a debrief exercise where we told them to say thank you to their partner without using words. So we had some physical debriefing exercises. And then they shared thoughts and answered specific questions in pairs and to the rest of the group. And we did this hopefully still with a calm voice, but we did a lot more walking around in the room to get a sort of a different energy among the players before we sat down and had the runda and discussed what their needs were, what they wanted to do at that point. So to sum this up briefly, in the Paralarp we do a lot of expectation management and of preparing our players, making them ready to play, and we make them trust each other, and we also shape the experience after the LARP. Before the workshop, we tell them what the LARP is about, so they know whether they would like to sign up or not. And in the workshop, we decide on what content and what parts we want to decide and what we want to leave open for the players. And we decide on the method that we want to use. And in the debrief, there are different player needs that we might want to accommodate to. And there are also needs that we have as designers and as organizers as to what we want the story to be, for instance, when the players have finished. So, like in total, I think it's important for you to remember that you have endless possibilities and that you should choose the methods that will fit your vision as designers and choose methods that fit with the experience that you want your players to have during the LARP. Yes, so that's it. Thank you.